signature. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Game Changer Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in Jacksonville, Florida. And each and every week, we do this show with people who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And this is a live show. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments for our guests to answer. For anyone interested in learning more about what we're doing in my business, we're doing a free live training on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern about how to stop losing prospects early. So we'll go over some really cool sales tactics there. We're also are hiring for our sales team. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, reach out to me on Instagram. This week on the show, we have another Jacksonville investor, Dom Felix. Dom, welcome to the show.
What's up, Mike? How you doing, man? Thanks for having me on. And I think it's incredible that you're doing this, man, and that you're just bringing so many people on that helps so many people out there. So thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you being on. For the people who don't know you, you want to share with us a little bit about your real estate journey over, I guess, about the last 7 years since you've been in it, maybe a little longer.
Yeah. So, I've had my license probably the better part of 12 or 13 years. And I've more heavily practiced real estate probably closer to seven, ever
Mm,
since I started Cash Geeks with Gonzalo. But for people that don't know me, what's up, everyone? My name is Dominick Felix. Um, a pretty aggressive entrepreneur. I do like to succeed. I'm super persistent in a lot of things that I do. I'm always that guy that, first one in the office, maybe not all the time last to leave, but I like to spend a lot of my time on my craft and whatever projects I'm working on. And I do like to see things through to the finish. I can't stand things being incomplete or unfinished. But yeah, man, it's just so unusual, getting into business for yourself. I didn't plan to become an entrepreneur. I kind of fell into it.
mm,
All I wanted, and this is probably close to over 20 years ago before I started my first business, all I really wanted was a career change at that time. Right.
mm,
So I was a call center sales individual. I was doing retention sales, which I think is one of the most difficult sales positions that are out there, and I was making between $70,000 and $80,000 on any given year. And I did that for about 4 years. And it just got repetitive. It got consistently the same. And I wanted something different, maybe not so much bigger or better, just a change, and maybe a little bit more of a directive career path. And I decided, I don't know if it was my dream, but I just made a decision to become a firefighter. And then I realized, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to take half a salary pay cut, because firefighters in Jacksonville at that time, they're starting at about $30,000 a year. And then I thought to myself, how am I going to make that difference up? What am I going to do? And I decided to
mm,
start a small business, start a lawn maintenance company. And I did. Um, I got a commercial lawnmower, and I've got all my equipment looking all good and pretty out there. And within like 7 weeks, I just drummed up enough business and enough clients to replace my job at that point in time.
mm,
And I didn't replace it. I kept everything going for a year. So that year was like a pivotal year for me. And it kind of showed me what I was capable of, because I was working full time in the call center. I essentially doubled my salary because I built a customer base that brought in another $75,000 for the year, doing grass cuts on the side. I was also going to fire school. I was also taking EMT courses, because you have to be a certified EMT while you're going to fire school. That was the year I got married to my wife. And my wife was pregnant with our firstborn. So there was so much that went on in that year. It was kind of mind blowing. And in hindsight, it's really tough to see how I got through it. It was a lot of aggressively long days. But it just, stuff like that, is like one of those things where, sometimes you don't know what someone's capable of until you put them in that position to see if they can succeed, whether they believe in themselves or not. And
mm,
that year taught me a lot about myself.
mm. What did you learn in that year about yourself?
So, I The funny thing about that question, Mike, is it took me probably 12 years to understand what I learned in that year.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that, right? So, maybe not 12 years. Let me rewind it. We're going to say 7 years.
Mm,
I'm going to tell you what I meant by that. Um, you know, I started my first business. I built it to be a really good, large size business. And, I would find myself in rooms with other entrepreneurs or at tables with clients and things like that. And it was almost like I didn't belong there, right? I felt like people were smarter than me, brighter than me. I felt a little bit
mhm,
like an outcast. And the reason I felt like that is because I'm not socially awkward, but I'm not socially paired up with a lot of the common things that people are into, like sports or the
mm,
news or politics, right? And those seem to be amongst the most common conversations that are out there, right?
mm,
So I don't fit well in those conversations. So a lot of times when I'm at these tables or a part of these groups and someone's talking about the Cowboys or the Jaguars, which I do like the Jaguars, I'm just kind of outcasted. I
mm,
also, I'm not highly educated. What I mean by that is I just don't have a college degree. And one more specifically with this example is I was at an industry event in my first business. It was the a mortgage field services event. And I was with a lot of my clients and a lot of my competitors in my first business. And they were all having these, what appeared to be high level conversations and talking sports. And I was kind of quiet on the side, kind of like a shy individual. However, my business was blowing away my competition. And that really
mm,
kind of put me in a position to question myself, like, how are you at this table right now? And it wasn't until I read the book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that I kind of realized what I had above and beyond a lot of other people. And it's just persistence. And
mm,
it sounds typical. We've heard that stuff before. If you watch podcasts and you're into like self-development, it sounds typical, but it's super true, man. I mean, it
mm.
might take me a little bit longer to get something done, but I'm just not going to stop until I get it done or I do it better, well above and beyond anyone else that's doing that in particular thing.
Gotcha. Interesting. And then, over the years, you've been in different, obviously we know each other, but you've been in kind of different areas or iterations of real estate. You want to talk about some of the pivotal moments that you had along the way?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so indirectly, I was always interested in real estate. I grew up with not a lot of money, with a single mother that had 7 children, and she didn't work. So we had some really tough times growing up. And there were times where, as an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old, I was the one putting dinner on the table,
Mm,
which was, we can go down another rabbit hole if we want to. Um, but the pivotal moments, yeah. So what I would see a little bit around me was the people that did have money, they might have owned 1, 2, or 3 homes or 2 homes on that block across the street. And for some reason, that was probably my only exposure at that time to people that had some kind of money, some kind of additional money that most people weren't used to. And I highly admired that. And it always made me want to, at some point, get into real estate or acquire real estate or hold land or things like that. So during my first 12 years with my first business, in the middle of that process or that experience, I got my real estate agent's license because I said, if I'm going to start buying and holding real estate, maybe I can capitalize on the commission by getting paid to buy my own real estate.
mm,
So that happened during that was probably about 12 or 13 years ago.
mm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's a pivotal moment. I got my license. I started buying and holding rentals. And then that taught me, that, you almost can't, well, not really can't, but, I wasn't making a whole lot of money on my rentals. It was very difficult to find rentals that cash flow. So I did want to get passive income to replace active income, or at least give me that security that if the active income was gone, the passive income would take care of it. And that lesson taught me that that's an extremely long road,
Mm,
especially, I guess, with single family or with limited income.
mm.
Yeah.
And then what did you do from there? What was your next pivotal point?
So, like in real estate or just in general?
Let's talk about real estate. Yeah.
Let's talk about real estate. Okay. So the next pivotal moment was I guess learning about wholesaling.
Mm,
Because with my first business, as that started to go in a different direction because of a market shift, and I did some research on what I'm going to do next. I thought about wholesaling because when I was buying real estate, I bought about 21 rentals in a year one year.
mhm,
And one of my purchase experiences was from a local wholesaler here in Jacksonville before I knew what wholesaling was.
mm,
But being this big bad businessman that owns all these rentals now, um, when he sent me the assignment agreement, I wanted to just not act like I didn't understand what it was, right? It looked like for the most part, it seems like a legit transaction is going through a title company. I'm going to sign off or whatever the case may be. I didn't really quite understand 0-day inspection. In my mind, it was like, all right, until it closes, I have a chance to go through and recheck out the property and, make sure it's a solid play. Well, when I did more research and I got a WDO inspection and stuff, which, it wasn't what I discussed with whoever put me under contract at that time. I found that it was just like riddled with termites, and it was just too bad a shape for my confidence level at that time to proceed with the transaction.
mm,
So I wanted to cancel, and I tried to cancel, and they're like, "It's fine, we'll let you cancel, but we're keeping the $2,000 earnest money deposit." And it's a wholesaler that we both know here in the local market. Um, and we're friends to this day, but we weren't friends at that time. And he was able to, he agreed to give me half back. He gave me half back.
mm,
He kept half at that time, and that was my first exposure to what wholesaling is. So later on, when I started doing my research on what other business I'm going to get into, and I really deeply looked into wholesaling, it seemed way more complicated
mm,
um, than I thought. It was very intimidating at that time. So I
mhm,
didn't quite rule into getting into it until I met Gonzalo.
mm,
And then once I met Gonzalo, and we had lengthy discussions, it was like, all right, Gonzalo has a good amount of wholesaling experience directly, and I have a really good amount of business building experience.
mm.
And that's when we engaged together to start a wholesaling company with this big dream of starting this big, huge army wholesaling company.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
And then obviously you built that to be pretty big. I mean, you guys were also focused a lot of hedge fund stuff when that was really going.
Yep.
Um, what were some challenges that you faced in terms of having, I mean, because at one point I think you guys had 30, 40 people, maybe more working for you.
We got up to 28, I think it
28.
was.
Okay.
It was just under 30, I'm pretty sure.
What were some challenges you faced to get to like the amount of transactions that you guys were doing there?
So in my first business, I had about 25 to 30 individuals, right? And
Mm,
we were doing about 5 million a year, and I was keeping about 20% of that, right?
mm,
But we never had a sales division, right? In that business, and I know we didn't go into the details, which we don't have to, but in that business, I was the sole individual salesperson that
mhm,
had to get these big national contracts for field maintenance work for the vendor base that I had, right?
mm,
Um, I didn't ever think about hiring a salesperson for that. I never thought about getting salespeople on the team for any reason.
mm,
Now, building a wholesale company is entirely different. It's heavily sales dependent. And if you want to grow and expand, there's only so much you can do as an individual, right?
mm, mhm,
So when it was a huge learning curve on hiring really good or really great salespeople. So that was an enormous challenge, right? We did get better at it gradually over time, One thing that I thought was really good was the system that we had, the company, the system, and the operations. And
Mm,
we built that so well that it kind of made it a little bit easier on salespeople rather than having to
mm.
be super talented or super creative or super artsy. So we had a very well defined process that if they followed it, they typically can do well as long as they're persistent and consistent.
What did you learn, like when you were hiring salespeople, that ultimately allowed you to hire great salespeople?
Um, I think, and I keep leaning on consistency and
Mhm,
persistence. They just have to have a really good history of being at jobs for a long time. You
mm,
want someone that's going to show up on time every day and be there and put a full day's work in. And
mm,
that's just good old fashioned being responsible, right?
mm,
So I think that's huge. It shouldn't be overlooked. Um, I'll rely on someone that's interested and eager to learn more than someone that's irresponsible and that may have done great in sales, but
mm.
they may not stick around for a good long time, or they may just call out sick a lot. I just need someone that's going to be there and that's going to be consistent. And one of the things that we do, and obviously we're reasonable with it, but one of the things that we challenge new hires with is like, all right, for the first 90 days, we don't really allow any days off, right? We
Mm,
need you to come in for the first 90 days on time and to show up every single day. So if you're late or you miss a day, unfortunately, we can't continue to keep you after that. Now, if there are any emergencies that come up that, and that's more of a judgment call, that are justifiable, let us know. We're human beings. We totally get it. But we
mm.
like to just, imprint that in the beginning upfront to let them know, listen, this is a serious decision. We want you on the team. We want people that want to develop themselves and grow with us. That we want them to take it deathly serious.
Yeah. What did your hiring process look like when you were building that sales team? When you got to the point, that the hiring process was working well?
So for some reason, and I don't know if you go through the same stuff, Mike, you might, but for some reason, with a lot of positions, we get a good amount of applicants, but
Mhm.
not with sales, right? With
Hmm,
sales, we'd get a fair amount of applicants, but for some reason, it was always a big challenge for us to get a high volume of applicants that we can go through to find the great ones that we think are great inside of the resumes that we get or the
mhm,
applications that we get, right? So, the way that we used to do it is we would run our own ads across multiple different platforms. And then
mhm,
we would also have staffing agencies run their ads on their platforms. And we would funnel salespeople into group interviews, right?
mm,
So we'd get these group interviews of anywhere from 5 to 25 people at a time, right?
mhm,
And we'd ask a handful of questions. And once again, I haven't been in Cash Geeks for maybe it's over 2 years, maybe closer to 3 years now. So I may
mhm,
not remember all of the specific questions, but we would ask a handful of questions and we'd look for people that are willing to volunteer or people that answer
huh,
questions that are more impressive than the way that other people ask them. And we look for people that respond really well if we call on them and things like that. So if we're going to only do 5, 6, or 7 questions for our big group, then it helps us find the people that stand out amongst the rest. Now
mm,
once we do that, we call it a first interview, but it's really part of the process that really gets them to the real interview, which is the second interview, which is the in-person interview.
mhm,
Now, in the second interview, it's been developed over time. It's kind of like a graded, it was about 20 questions and it was a graded interview. And then on top of the 20 questions that we ask, if anything that they say drives us to ask more information or go in a different direction, we'll do that also, but we'll bring it right back in line with the typical questions.
mhm,
And the reason we wanted to do that and score the different questions is because we might have a gut feel about people. and we really may want to hire them. And then we may have another person that impresses us, and then a third person that impresses us, but we're only going to choose one. Sometimes the questions help break that tie.
Mm,
And it's
gotcha.
like it helps us, remember that they answered this question really correctly. Because when you have 28 people on staff, and then you're interviewing a lot of people, and there is a little bit of rotation, people coming in, people going out, you may not perfectly remember everything that goes on during the day and everything that happened on those interviews, and you may not make the decisions right then and there that day. It may be later that day, the next day, or a day after that, and then you have to go
Mm,
back and review it, and then it reminds you on how well that person did.
gotcha. And then, so that Zoom interview you did, that group one, um, did you find that, were you mostly looking for people to volunteer, or did you find that sometimes you had to call on people?
Um, we were mostly looking for people to volunteer.
Mm, yeah, it's interesting that, I think that's a super interesting way I've never heard of, right? You want someone who's going to be like, oh, I don't care what
Right.
everyone thinks, I'm going to talk, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So they get to the in-person interview, then what was next after that?
So there's the first interview, there's the in-person interview, there's a short discussion. If it gets to the point where we feel like we need another interview, it mostly means we used to do it, but it mostly meant at that point, we just can't rule to have that person come in and join the team. If we're unsure
Mm,
about it, then it's a no. So the next point would be to hire them. So one thing that also helped us with I forgot to mention on the second interview, if they do well, and so far we would rule, or we're close to ruling to hire them on the second interview, as long as we know it's not a no hire, we put them on the auto dialer, and we make
mm,
them do cold calls on the second interview. I forgot that was a huge part of it for us.
mm,
Now, that can't always tell if they're a great salesperson, because it's a cold call and it's a really short script and it's not too difficult. But it really did tell us that they weren't afraid of the phones, because there
mm,
are people that I felt interviewed well, and once we brought them to the dialer, they just said it's not for them.
mm. Oh, they said it's not for them.
Correct. They said it's not for them. There's other times where they would get on the dialer and they would talk to people and they would just suck. Now, the cold call script that we had, it wasn't too long. It wasn't too difficult. So it was like, here's the cold call script. I'm going to leave it with you for 10 minutes. Study it, memorize it as best you can. I'm going to have Pete, our technology guy, come in with a headset and a laptop, and he's going to run the dialer, and you're just going to talk to the people.
Mm,
Yeah. So the first time, one thing is they said it's not for them because they're just too on the spot and really nervous. The second thing that could happen, like I said, was they would just fall apart on the phones. And other than that, you'd either do okay or you'd do really great.
mm, gotcha.
Yep.
So, obviously now you're doing something different. You want to
hmm
talk about the model that you're working on today.
Yeah, the model that we're working on today, it's funny because it's just an evolution, right? The company that we built with Cash Geeks was really great for its purpose, right? It
Mm,
was built in a way to where it revolved around, and in, like you said, primarily hedge fund properties. It was more like an 80-20. 20% of it was good old fashioned wholesale fixer uppers. The other 80% was pulling data specifically that targets their buy box, right?
mm,
So it worked well in that market. Now that we're not in that market anymore, it's for us a learning experience, right? So when we hire salespeople, use the same scripts, it works okay, but almost not okay, as to where, all right, that same model for me right now is not working.
mm,
So now it's like, what does work? What's the new thing? What's the new path? And for us right now, it's multiple exit strategies, right? And it's also jumping back in directly on the phone, on the calls, into the sales to continue to refine it, make it better, bring a bunch of cash in, right? That's always
mhm,
important for businesses. Um, and, perhaps not build the company out the same way that we did with
Mm,
cash gigs, right? Um, because and it's funny because with the process that we're going through right now, it's multiple exit strategies rather than just locking you up one way for hedge funds. And what I
mm,
mean by that is good old fashioned discounted cash wholesale deals. Now, a lot, we're all hearing about novation strategy that's been around for a couple or few years now that it's becoming more and more familiar to people. So we're doing a lot of that. That's probably 60 to 70% of what we do. And
mm,
then subject to or creative deals. Mostly it's all subject to with regards to what we're locking up. So we're transacting deals in those three methods. And the way that and we didn't really direct it to go this way, but the way that it's going is almost like, all right, now instead of building a team, we want to be like the LeBron James of what we do. Be incredibly good, incredibly great. Like I'm mainly involved in dispositions, right? And
mm,
Sam and Lewis are involved in acquisitions. But we want to be the best in the country, right? We
mm,
want to be way better than anyone else. And what's happening is it feels so far all signs are pointing to where we can very likely make as much as we made with Cash Geeks, net more with just us three doing the sales.
mm,
So what we're starting to do is we're starting to build support staff around us to support. I don't really want to say mundane tasks, but tasks that are not related or closely related to sales. Your
mm,
clerical tasks, all the support stuff, all of the paperwork. Take that off it and just keep me on the phone talking to people, right?
mm,
Because that's our gift, you know. When I'm talking to buyers, I want people to get a great deal. I want them to have a success and I want to transact more with them, but they need to feel that the deal is tight. I almost can't come down. Like I'm going to just ride it really closely so that I can not mess the deal up, not drive them away, and just try to keep them as close to my number as possible or as close to whatever the real number that I think should be in should that it should be as possible because they should want the same for me. If I'm going to keep bringing deals to them, we got to eat. We've got to do
mhm,
well. And the sad thing is, Mike, it's a doggy dog world out there. Everyone wants everything as low as humanly possible, and rightfully so. If they want to win and they want to stay in business, in a weird way, I want that for them too. But I need something fair on my side.
mm,
And as the business owner, I care about that the most. Now, I've always been an advocate on empowering others, to take the responsibilities and grow the team, which I still will do. But this market, Mike, is a really sensitive market, right?
mm,
And it's really got to be picked apart. It's got to be learned. And it's blowing my mind that we can do so well on the phone as individual business owners and produce almost as much income as 28 people with just the small team that we have that are just highly, highly talented. Isn't that
mm.
crazy?
Yeah. I'm actually curious. So I mean, I'm not really that involved in the disposition side. I mean, we flip a lot, so we've got kind of realtors handling that. But I'm
Right,
curious
right.
to hear, like, what is kind of your strategy, whether that's, how you're getting in front of buyers or just the conversations that you're having. Like, what is your strategy in this market that's so different than 2 years ago?
Sam and I do sales in two different ways, and they both work really well. So I'm
Mm,
glad that you asked that question. The way that, and I don't know if this sounds shitty, but the way that I like to do sales is I like for people to either really win or feel like they really win, and that I got stepped on and they got over on me. I don't need them to know that I'm the winner. I'm the best person. I made a 50 grand spread on this. Let me
mm,
let you have that emotional win so that I can feed my team and I can feed my family, right?
mm,
But not really lose, if that makes sense.
mm-hmm,
So it's really all in that level of persuasion on that phone call. And it's in the tonality and the little small indicative things that we say in those conversations.
Mm,
Um, so part of what's been coming up a lot is mentioning to the buyers or the investors that, like, one example is we had a deal in Savannah, Georgia,
mhm,
right? It was a duplex. We really did feel like it deserved to sell around the 450 range, right?
mhm,
We had it for 350,
mhm,
right? So it was a really great deal. We had it as an ovation. We put it up on the market, and you know, people just came in aggressively in the mid to upper threes, and then one person came in at four, and they were at four, but they wanted a 5-day inspection period. And typically, I don't like to allow inspection periods, but I think I vetted them decently well. They used one of those JWB LLCs, so I felt like they were real buyers and they weren't trying to
mhm,
flip it. They understood the concept of putting EMD in at a fair number in a really fast period of time. So I just vetted them really well. I felt that they were real buyers,
mhm,
and that with all the questions that I asked, I felt like there was a very slight chance of renegotiation, but then again, they may be too busy or they just may not. So I did take the gamble because it was the better offer out of all of them.
mm,
Now they did come back on day 5 with a renegotiation, right? And this is an example of what I've done several times, but they were at 382.5. Um, and then I have a conversation with them just saying, I just thought we were good. I thought you understood that I priced it already with an aggressive discount based on its condition. I had no idea you were going to come back at that low of a number. Like, that's super surprising. And then they justify why. Right. And when they justify why, I mentioned, listen, we've talked about that already. We've talked about all that stuff. You told me you wanted it at the number that we previously agreed on because of all that stuff already. Are you saying you're repeating the same stuff to me? Were you not being truthful when we initially talked about it? So it
mm,
goes in that direction. I'm like, listen, we've already made an aggressive reduction. It's going to be very difficult if I have to revisit the seller, and I don't want to ruin this deal because then none of us will have a deal. And you know how these deals go. You know how these investment deals go. These wholesale deals go. We've all done a good amount of deals. At this point, it feels just way too sensitive to go and revisit the seller. So during that conversation, they came up to 385 and then they came up to 390. But the problem is, and it's not a problem, is like a lot of people might just say okay to 382 or to
mhm,
385 or to 390. But if you agree too fast, it's like, oh, you were lying the whole time. I just wanted to make them know or make them feel that I just don't know, you know? So I got to the point, and I think I did it in a good gradual way to where I really didn't want to budge from the 4. And then they just got to the point where they just really, they didn't want to mess the deal up for us. They felt bad for us, and then they wanted to cancel.
mm.
And I said, listen, let's not cancel. Let me work on it. I'll get back with you in 10 or 15 minutes. And then I agreed to the 390. We signed off and went to close.
Huh.
But, those conversations, if you keep doing that on a consistent basis over time, they'll beat people up and people will want to give up sooner. But you have to stay consistent with it. You have to fight, because if you take all the emotions out of it and you realize, oh, that was just 10 minutes for 10,000 bucks or 15,000 bucks, it's enormous. It's life changing. And I look at those decisions as if you're making $15,000 in 10 minutes, if you can do
Mm,
that every 10 minutes, that's a $40 million decision we just made, or 20, whatever the
mhm.
math comes to over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And it's just a silly way to look at it, but that's what justifies to me, like, that's crazy money in a short period of time. So we should treat those conversations with care and with interest and desire, and put your all into it, because it's just words, at the end of the day. And you should
Mm,
care enough about it to try to give it your all.
yeah. It's interesting you say that. I've had a, similar conversation with the guys on my sales team. They'll get a deal and maybe they'll come back and they got it, let's say $10,000 below the MAO, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'll take them up to the whiteboard and I'll say, good job, you got it $10,000 below your MAO. How much longer do you think that took? They're like, oh, it's like 10 minutes extra just sitting there uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
put it on the board. I say, well, $10,000 extra spread. You made a $1,400 extra for 10 minutes of being uncomfortable. How many times do you think you can do that this week? And then they start doing it more.
I love that.
It's a very
I
similar
absolutely
idea.
love that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. Yeah. But I think why is that not important on the disposition side?
Oh, I
It
agree.
should be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should be, because if we can etch, 5, 6, or 7 grand more on the acquisition side and 2 to 5K more on the disposition side over the year, that will save some people's entire business, Mike.
Mm,
Some people might, in like little adjustments or bumps, make an extra 250,000, and that might be their profit. And you
yeah.
might either break even or go out of business because you're not doing those little things.
Mm. How are you treating, because I know you're doing innovations and I know you're just doing straight wholesale too. Like how do you treat those differently, or are you just kind of treating it similarly?
So that's a super question. And, I come from a history of doing a tremendous amount of hedge fund deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I use that experience to our advantage. So when we talk about a cash deal, one of the biggest things, and you guys probably practice this a lot too, is just try to get a number out of the seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation, find out about the motivation, care about what they're going through, relate to them, build a friend, try to see if they can reveal a number, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can tell in that conversation that they really believe that they deserve that number and it's miles apart from the cash deal, um, you almost have to deliver the information in a way where you're not going to want to take this deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to have to buy this for cash, I'm going to have to go through X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go through all this stuff. I don't want to offend you. I'm not sure if it's going to be right for you, because my partners are going to want it at this number, XXX.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, there's no way I'm going to take this, whatever, whatever, whatever. And we justify why. We see if we can bridge it. And if we can't, the brilliant idea is, listen, we work with a lot of institutions, we work with a lot of investors, and they just buy properties in bulk, and they typically can pay a lot more than we can, right? So if you want to just give me a few minutes, we have a system we can run it through, and we have some people we can check with to see if this is even closer, anywhere closer to the number that you needed at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, we come back to them and say, listen, if you want, if I'm going to close cash, I can close typically in like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. If I can get your number, if you give me 60 to 75 days or whatever the time frame is based on that conversation, I can very likely get my investors to buy it. And then we tell them most of the time, based on our preliminary reviews, we know that we can get it done. So that's about 80% of the time. The other 20% of the time, we'll just get retail backups for you, right? So we'll get pre-qualified retail people that we feel that we know can buy that house.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they agree to all of it and we're contracting it, we also go over a power of attorney to let them know how we're getting those retail backup offers with the
Mm,
MLS listing and stuff like that.
right. And then on the dispo side, let's say like you're talking to investors directly versus like maybe talking to agents with retail buyers. How does that conversation sound different?
The funny thing is, it comes up all the time. It comes up all the time. Like, what is this? Because what we're going to do if we put it on the market is we're either going to use a flat fee listing service or make a
Mhm.
realtor relationship and list it. And I like to field the calls, right? I like a lot of them to come into us, into the
Mhm.
office, because we're just going to take care of it a lot better based on our direct direction. So everyone's not everyone, but most people are curious. Like, what is this? It says a for sale by owner, or it's listed with this service. Like, what's the scenario going on here? It looks like it's an investor. What's your position? Who are you? Are you the seller? Oh, you're not the seller. That's come up a lot. And
Mm,
essentially, we used to complicate it by explaining the process, and now we've simplified it by just saying, we have a power of attorney with the underlying seller. We're an associate of the seller, and we have a power of attorney, and it just allows us to list it and make decisions on pricing and stuff like that.
mm,
And people, most all the time, they just accept it. They're fine with it. And then we just explain to them, it's just like a regular transaction to you. You just make your offer and we just go to close, just like
yeah.
any other transaction. So we just try to like be passive with it and
Mm,
just act like it's not a big deal. And most of the time it's totally fine, and people don't probe further.
yeah. And then on the negotiation side, though, obviously we just kind of you shared that recent story with that Savannah deal with an investor. Are you treating the negotiation a bit differently if you're dealing with a realtor with a retail buyer?
Am I treating it differently? So I do mention to them we've priced it aggressively because we
Mm,
try to pre-account for the current condition that it's in. So just
mm,
take that into consideration when you guys are putting your offer in, that if you think you want to deduct for a roof or flooring or cosmetics or whatever, we've done a lot of that on the front end. So are you guys okay with this number? Just make sure that you talk
mm,
to your buyers and what. So we do try to pre-vet it. We can't really, like, what I've learned in this new market is if you do that too aggressively, it will chase them away because retail buyers are very emotional.
mm,
So it's more of a hybrid of getting your point across and letting them know there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel if we really need to figure something out.
okay, so
We're
leaving
not
the
going to be unreasonable.
yeah, you still want them to put the offer in to get the conversation really going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then I think we should touch a little bit on this. We haven't yet, is you're doing a lot of kind of community stuff that you're building this community as you guys are doing your business, right? And you're filming a lot of live stuff. I think it's super interesting. Do you want to kind of share, I guess, first of all, why you decided to do that?
Yeah, so you always you put a lot of time into. So this is going to be my third wave of getting involved into a business, building a business. I've been successful a couple of times before building a multi-million-dollar business, so I know that I'm capable of it. But when businesses come and go, and you have to start from scratch, there's always so many different ways to do things.
Mm,
I'm starting to want to put a lot more of an influence on a social community and a social brand, right?
mm-hmm,
Because I just feel like regardless of what happens with businesses, those will always be around. And, as interested as I am with building businesses and making a good amount of money, where really at the end of the day, I don't care about money, I genuinely do like helping people. I
mm,
tend to lean a little bit more toward the act of building a community. I guess Hormozy says it a bunch of times, right? Give, 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 give until people ask. I don't want to build anything that leans toward hard sales or aggressive sales or just selling, and I don't want to say poisoning my brand, but I think being liked is just important to me. It just feels good. It feels great. I'd rather
mm,
be that individual than being proud of growing a base of haters because it gives me attention, right?
mm,
So if I build a little bit more of a personal brand and a really good community that genuinely is self-policing and can produce deals for themselves and us here in the office, I think it'll be an ultimate win.
yeah. And for the people who haven't seen the stuff that you're putting out, like how are you going about building that community?
So far it's been pretty organically, right? So we're just trying to, I mean, you see the green screen behind us. We're trying our best to, as we do our calls and we field our calls, hit the record button with the
Mm,
OBS interface connection that we've got set up. And as we record the calls, we put them out on our social profiles. So TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, right? Um, and we have a lot of indirective things set up that can point people toward the fact that we have a Facebook group. The Facebook group is called All
Mm,
Leads Suck,
mhm,
right? And the concept of all leads suck is, it's sad to say, but not only wholesaling and real estate in general, but also for most entrepreneurs, people are in and out of business for themselves, and way more people fail than succeed.
mhm,
Now, for wholesaling, a lot of people blame it on the leads and the lead flow, right? I hear it. I mean, dude, we've been doing this. You've been doing this for years now, Mike. We kind of grew together in this industry, in this market. And, salespeople will come and go, and a lot of people will blame it on the leads. And if you stop blaming it on the leads and you start looking at yourself more, you're just going to be way more successful. It's just
mhm,
a way of it. It's just what we've experienced. Um, so it's just kind of a play on words, naming it all leads suck. Um, just because it's cool, fun, and attractive. And then our job is to oppose that fact.
mm. Gotcha. What is I'm curious, what is OBS? I've haven't heard of that before.
I don't know what it stands for. It's a program that's on our PC that kind of is hooked up with a camera that allows me to record, and the videos, just we can show it to you next time in your office. They go into a video file every time. So I hit start, it starts. I hit stop, that video goes into a file. And we have
Huh.
the social media editors here. They'll take those videos and then they'll clip them and edit them, and then they'll put them up on social media. Now, what it also does is for podcasters, you can simultaneously record and go live with multiple different groups on social media. Like you can go
Mm.
Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and there's a handful of other things that you can do with it. So it does that. It probably does more. I don't really know.
And it like if you're on calls, it will like let the people who, follow your page like hear the calls in the video as opposed to just hearing your side. Like they can hear the seller or the,
Correct. Yep, yep,
buyer as
yep. They'll
well.
hear the
Okay.
seller or the buyer, and they'll hear our side. Yep, it'll record both
Very
sides
cool.
simultaneously. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. So, have you heard of Restream?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay. What is this that we're on now?
We use
Guest
one
Ecam?
called Ecamm. Yeah.
Ecam. It's probably I don't know if it can be related. So disregard that comparison.
Um, cool. I think another thing I'd like to talk with you about is I know you guys are, we were talking in your office, I think it was just yesterday or maybe the day before. For anyone who doesn't know, we're in the same building. So that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Um, is you guys are using a lot of AI and you were saying, if we're not able to get in touch with the lead, you're kind of throwing into the AI. Actually, maybe just kind of if you could walk people through how it works, because I'm not the best person to explain it.
Yeah, so we have a CRM that's called AI Speakly,
Hmm.
and the CRM is infused with talking AI and texting AI, right?
Hmm.
Now, you have to be careful when you're using talking AI because the leads that you bring into your CRM, they have to opt in correctly, right? With the
Mm.
correct verbiage that allows you to use AI to contact the people with AI, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so most lead providers have adapted, right? So if you're going to send leads into your CRM, most of them have pre-accounted for that in their terms and conditions or whatever the privacy policy, whatever it is that people
Hmm.
check when they submit a form. So when a lead comes into our system, the first thing we want to do is have human beings talking to them and not really the AI. So salespeople want to talk, and we'll want to make the good old-fashioned college try of just calling and trying to get them on the phone. At a certain point, people will put dead leads into a dead lead bucket and maybe run a dialer on them, or have
Hmm.
a follow-up manager go to them, or have whatever process it is that they have. So our process is, the first 10 days are the 10 days of hell. You just got to call them people at least 3 times a day or several times a day, double tapping, just trying to get people on the line, right?
Hmm.
And if at some point in time they just don't go on the line, we take it and we give it to the AI, and the
Hmm.
AI will try to dial and call 2 or 3 times a day and try to text and send a bait text and do all these different things through the workflows that we set up to
Hmm.
get them back on the phone. Now, when they get them back on the phone, it can have a conversation with them. It can
Mm,
do an introduction, it can ask some questions, and it can just try to see if there's still some interest. Now, I don't think it's good enough, in my opinion, to have these really long, elaborate conversations, but it can check in and it can ask a few things. And if the people are interested, it can live transfer the call to the
mm,
sales guys here. So it might get on and say, hey, you filled out a form not too long ago asking if you want a cash offer. Do you want me to see if I can get you that offer really quick? Are you still interested? Yeah, I'm still interested. Okay, hold the line a second. Now it'll
mm,
work. It'll work like an automation or like a text to where based on the answers, it'll do something different. Right.
mm,
So there's a lot of if this, then that conditions that can be built in. So it can
mm,
be as short or as long as a conversation as you really want to set up. You just have to gauge like how long people will stick around, how long your
mm.
leads will stick around and talk to a robot. So what we've experienced so far, likely not too long. So we just like the concept of it getting people on the phone with a very small amount of qualification and then get it over to a real life person.
Gotcha. Is that kind of as far as you're taking it, which is, hey, were you still interested in a cash offer? And if they give a positive response, transferring, or do you go
Yep.
slightly further? Okay.
No, we don't go slightly further. We're gonna build it out a little, test it a little bit more over time. But right now,
Mm,
for those follow ups, it's just get them on the line, see if they're still interested, get them over to a live person.
gotcha. And is there, we do a lot of cold calling ourselves, not AI. We've got people doing it. And sometimes you run into the issue if we're doing live transfers too, where we run in-person appointments. So in the afternoon, live transfers might be going to no one if all the reps are on appointments.
Mhm.
Is there a way with like the AI where sales manager could basically turn it up or turn it down where they're like, wow, we've got a lot of sales reps in the office right now. Let's crank this thing versus, you know, obviously with humans, you can't say, hey, everyone go home early. All the reps are on appointments, right? Like, is that a possibility with the AI
Yeah,
or?
man, it's super robust, dude. It's extremely possible. Yeah. So you control. So when you either purchase this CRM or most all AI platforms that I've seen that use talking AI, you can adjust the volume or the capability, right?
Mm,
So I guess if you have a ton of leads in your system and you have to keep your guys busy and they've all opted in the right way, but a lot of them have gone dead or you can't get them back on the line and you want to
mm,
run calls through them, right? You can do a call a minute, you can do two calls a minute, you can do 50 calls a minute. The more
mm,
volume of calls you do, the more people it'll get on the line and the more it'll transfer over to your team, right? And I think the capability now is about 10,000 dials in 30 minutes, right? So it's
okay.
extremely
Yeah.
robust. It can do a lot in a really short period of time. Um, so I think, if I remember correct, all right. So cold calling with an auto dialer, depending on the dialer that you're using. So say it's
Mm,
one of those 10 line dialers. A VA can do 1,000 calls, 1,000 dials in a day. And
mm-hmm,
1,000 dials typically produce about a couple of leads. At least that's the
mm-hmm,
cold calling that I've been exposed to, that I've been used to. So all
mm-hmm,
different ways to do it, right? So if you want the AI to act like two virtual assistants, you just double the amount of dials. You do 2,000 dials a day, or
mm,
4,000 or 5,000, and then you can replicate it from there to emulate, what a human virtual assistant can do,
yeah.
or more than one human virtual assistant can do.
And if you have one sales rep in the office, and let's pretend he or she is not outbound dialing. They're just sitting there waiting for the AI, which probably isn't realistic. But I mean, how many dials are you going to have the AI make an hour to keep basically that person like busy on the line, that sales rep?
You know, you want the sales rep to get the leads in gradually. You
Mm,
want the sales rep to be able, like, one of the simplest things, Mike, I've learned over the years is it's super important for the sales reps to have long conversations, right?
mm,
And it might sound simple or dumb because there's so many moving parts to sales that are important. But the fact of the matter is, if a great sales rep can have a long conversation, 30 to 45 minutes,
mm,
the person on the other side, they're less likely to want to do that with another company all over again if
mm-hmm,
that's what their expectation is, right? And that gives you a little bit more of a leg up. We're just looking for a few percent here, a few percent there of the
mm,
potential for success, right? So I think for one salesperson with no junior person along with them, and you just want to get them right amount of leads, maybe a couple thousand dials a day.
Okay. Gotcha.
So like that would be like two human virtual assistants just
Hmm.
getting leads over to them. And maybe to get 4 to 6 leads or something to them, and they can have good quality conversation because the sales reps are also probably going to do their own dials too, right?
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the texting side of it, like how do you guys use AI in terms of texting?
Um, it's kind of the same stuff.
Hmm.
A lot of it is bait texting, and then if they text back, that's when the AI, because it's a combination of texting automations, and then when the replies come, then the AI kicks in to
Hmm.
answer the replies, right?
Hmm.
So it's just gauging. It's the same thing as the talking, but in text form,
Hmm.
gauging interest, see if they're still interested, and then in the CRM, the conversations pop up, right? So
Hmm.
when the automations and the AI are talking to people, something will pop up in the conversation view. And then a
Hmm.
human can look at it and they can either call them um, either right then and there or let the conversation play out a little bit more. Because if it's a lot of F you and take me off your list and all this bullshit, they probably are not going to call them. And then the talking AI and the texting AI will automatically send them to DNC and resend them to dead or put them to rest for a while if they're just not ready right now.
Gotcha. Are you using the AI at all? Like, let's say someone filled out a form on your website and, maybe it's like, I don't know, crazy late. Like, is the AI kind of messaging them at all to have a conversation to kind of at least warm them up till a salesperson can get to it if it's after hours or?
Yeah, I mean, it'll tell them that someone's going to call them back early in the morning.
Hmm.
We don't have it having too long of any elaborate conversations. I think, one thing that I've always felt and I still believe in sales is um, that level of curiosity has to kind of stay there and
Mm.
prepare and keep the interest for the person to want to get on the call with the salesperson.
Uh,
So if the AI is going to have too much of a conversation or reveal a little too much, we don't want it to either satisfy or discourage the person on the other line. So it just will just dangle certain things and keep that level of curiosity or hope or whatever until the human gets on the line with them. And one of the simplest things it'll do, like if it's overnight, especially, it's like, hey, we just received your call. My sales guy is going to give you a call at 9:30. Is that okay? And they'll say
mm,
yes, and they'll
mm-hmm,
say perfect, we'll do it. Or if they say no, and then it'll say what time is better,
mm-hmm.
um, and then they'll give a time, and then we try to abide by those times.
Gotcha. Very cool. And then you guys are doing pretty much nationwide from what we were discussing the other day.
Hmm. Hmm.
What made you decide to go that route versus just doing the Jacksonville area?
You know, um, when Gonzalo and I grew and built Cash Geeks, we were cold call heavy, right? The reason we were so cold call heavy is because you can pull specific data points that are the exact buy box for the process that we had for the hedge funds that we were working with,
Mm,
right? If you do PPC, Facebook ads, digital marketing, stuff like that, there's going to be a lot of things outside of that buy box that just wouldn't make sense for the exit path that we wanted to build on, right?
mm,
So my experience for the last, or I mean, I've been out of it for Cash Geeks for 2.5 years now, but my entire experience with Cash Geeks for 5.5 years was that it was cold calling.
mm,
For some reason, inside of Cash Geeks, with that model, we couldn't complement it properly with digital marketing and things like that. It just didn't
mm,
work out well for us, right?
mm,
So now in this new company, so the company name now is Simple Cell, right?
mm,
So when we started with this company, we wanted to revisit because there's so many good things that people are talking about with digital marketing leads and PPC, right?
mm,
So we said, we owe it to ourselves to give it a good old college try and see if we can make it work. And to
mm,
us, if we're in the deals directly and we have these multiple exit strategies, those leads were a lot warmer. We're
mm,
way warmer than the cold leads from the cold calls. Um, and we pride ourselves in being decently well at sales.
Hmm.
And we just felt like we would perform well with it. Um, so you said, why did we go nationwide? So we went nationwide because you can test the waters on these digital leads at a lower cost.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like if I'm going to go in one market or in Jacksonville, and if the cost per lead for PPC is, I don't know, $1,000, $700, I don't want to test it out and be wrong and waste 20 grand, 50 grand,
Yeah.
So if we're able to keep that cost down, maybe $100 a lead, $150 a lead, we can test the waters in these outside markets, prove concept, and then we can decide if we want to hone in on one individual market or a handful of certain individual markets.
Is that kind of typically where you are at? Is about $100 to $150 for like an inbound PPC lead when you're doing this strategy?
Yeah. So Lewis, are we still around $150 a lead for the digital marketing leads? I think we're hovering around there. Yeah, we're hovering around there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's way cheaper than if you narrow it in. And then,
Yeah, I mean, because like Jacksonville, I think, and this is probably a year and a half ago with just Jacksonville, it was like between like because it's I think it was $700 cost per lead, but then when you factor in the management fee for the
mhm,
company, it gets closer to 1,000.
yeah, yeah. What are the challenges though that you face when going the national route?
Everything, everything, man. So and it's cool and it's fun challenges because it exposes you to so much. And
Mm,
I like figuring stuff out, right? And I don't want to do it recklessly to lose money, but it's a really fun experience. So the challenges are you realize either it's very difficult to dispo in
mhm,
lowly populated markets, and if that's the case, what are the best routes to do it, right? And
mm,
if you figure out the best routes to disposition in lowly populated markets, that'll help you disposition in highly populated markets maybe a little bit better, right?
mm.
So I think it's a priceless experience,
What
because
are the before I forget, what are the best methods to dispo in lowly populated markets?
I mean, by hands, it's getting a power of attorney with the seller and listing it on the open market.
Mm,
That's going to be the number one best way to disposition. But another thing that people probably underestimate, is Facebook Marketplace. Facebook
really? Okay.
Marketplace has your magical buyers. So it's surprised us a couple times. It's not consistent,
Mm,
but it's something that should be done simultaneously,
mhm,
along with other ways to market. Obviously, most people know that Facebook groups are great, you
mhm,
know. And here in Jacksonville, we have an incredible Facebook group called Yellowbird or
mhm.
Yellowbird Connect. It's finding those Yellowbird groups, is what we say here, in other outside markets
Sure.
because the group is magical, man. And
Yeah,
Kyle Paskowitz is a magician.
yeah. Yeah, I think there's like 12,000 people in that group. I didn't even know that many. I don't even think that many people actually invest in
And
Facebook.
dude, it's a genuinely organically built, very interactive group. I mean, because
Mm,
dude, I've seen it time after time, and I don't want to name the group because a friend of mine has it, but there's a group out there with 150,000 people that gets nowhere near the activity that Yellowbird
mhm.
gets.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot like that. So I cut you off there because I was just really curious, but what are the additional challenges you find going nationwide?
So we talked about, yeah, acquiring in those markets are a challenge too,
Mm,
because you can look at comps, but we continue to get surprised on the neighborhoods and the activity. So, for example, we
mm,
have a novation in a neighborhood called Lakewood Ranch, Florida. It's just outside of Sarasota. It's kind of like Yulee, how Yulee is to Jacksonville, right?
mhm,
And it's still decent. We're not getting a lot of activity on, but we thought it was going to be like wildfire. Like we're going to list it lower than what most of the listings are going for in that area. We're
mm,
going to sell it well, and we'll make a good spread on it, right? But we're not getting a lot of activity. We've maybe had 2 or 3 visits in almost a month, and we've
mm,
lowered it gradually. and we got it to the point where we can't really lower it much more. And it just turns out there's a couple of new build neighborhoods there that have prices that are lower than our price, and they're giving all types of benefits, bonus, pluses, additives, concessions, and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and that's killing that deal.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
knowing the local markets are tricky. Um, Dispositioning it to people that you don't know is tricky.
Mm.
Building that disposition list, finding those groups, and finding paths and ways to sell those deals.
Gotcha. Are you using an investor lift or any of those type tools at all, or?
You know, we probably should look more into different ways to use InvestorLift, because with Cash Geeks, we had InvestorLift,
Mm.
and we didn't have a whole lot of really good success with it.
Mm.
And in Simple Cell, we've also used InvestorLift through other people,
Hmm.
and have not had too good of an experience with it. And I don't
Huh.
think it's investor lift. It's probably we're not using it in the most effective way, especially without direct control on ways to use it. Maybe
Sure.
finding buyers with different ways to reach out to them. But listing our stuff on Investor Lift, we've not had the best experience with it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end here, and there's always two questions I like to ask at the end of the show.
Okay.
The first is, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced in a real estate deal?
So what comes to mind first is, and I didn't have a lot of time to think through it because, I've probably, with Cash Geeks and with the business that we're doing now, it's probably over 1,200 wholesale deals.
Hmm.
But what comes to mind is a recent deal where, and it's typical. It's not anything outlandish or outside of what people might normally. Hold on, something's ringing and might probably don't hear it.
It's a live transfer.
Did you hear it?
No, no, I'm joking.
Okay. Now I lost your screen. Is it here? Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, sorry about that.
You're
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So we have a deal in an outside market, or we had one, and we sold it successfully, thankfully. But it was in Columbia, Missouri,
Hmm.
and it was a nice house and a decent subdivision, cookie cutter subdivision. So it's one of those things that if you buy it right, flip it, sell it, it would just be smooth.
Hmm.
It was going into foreclosure in about 2 weeks, and I have another screen I have to close. And the seller was on meth. Dude, I literally had 3 sellers on meth simultaneously. 3 deals trying to dispo with sellers on meth simultaneously. So this is one of the meth sellers. I didn't realize they're so popular out there, dude. It's crazy. Um, so it was just super difficult to get her on the line, keep
Mm.
her on the line. Um, she she had this house. It looks nice from the outside, but it's completely trashed on the inside. She
Hmm.
was living in the garage and not in the house, right? And the
Mm.
house was completely trashed. Dog feces all over the place. Multiple buyers told me that when they went inside this house, they couldn't step through it at all and avoid dog feces. So dog feces would get all over their feet. What this lady would do is she would live in the garage with her dog. And when her dog had to go to the bathroom, she let him in the house. I don't, by the life of me, understand why she didn't live in the house and have the dog go shit in the garage. So that's the way her life had evolved. Um, but people just they couldn't see past the condition to see the
Mhm.
opportunity, and we thought we had it priced right. So we thought we were going to make like 30, 40 grand. We got squeezed all the way down to like 5 grand, and it was really tough to renegotiate her because she wasn't of sound mind to understand why we had to be at the price we need to be at.
Mhm.
Because if we do $5,000 deals where costs per deal can be anywhere from a variation of 2,500 to $4,000,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to be out of business doing $5,000 deals,
Mhm.
right? So it really got to probably like a day before where I think it was morning of, where we finally had to come get her to agree to a number that was fair to us. It was a $14,000 deal at the end of the
Hmm.
day. And have the title company go. They had to close, like the title agent from the title company had to personally visit, and we really had to grind to get this done. They closed on the car hood outside of the front of the house because no one could go inside that house.
Mm.
And it wasn't reasonable to go anywhere or meet them or go to the title company, even though it was only 2 miles away. And she drives, and go there. And the buyer also wanted less. So it was just really difficult to convince all parties to get to a number that was fair and really made us be profitable on the deal and get
Mm.
it done. And then she also wanted all types of post occupancy. So we were able to get like 2 months post occupancy down to 2 weeks. And she was trying to get hotels out of it. It was just like a lot of unreasonable requests, but we
Uh,
finally got through it and we finally closed and we finally made a positive spread.
nice. Well, not nice, but I'm glad it worked out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the second question I always like to ask for the people who are newer watching the show is if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for your first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
So if it's people just looking for their first deal, I think there's two things that immediately come to mind. Don't be nervous, apprehensive, or afraid to talk about numbers that make sense, right?
Mm.
Because if you don't either train yourself, your team, or other people, they will train you, right? So if you have a $200,000 property that you know deep in your heart you need it at $75,000, and I say 200,000, we're talking about ARV. You
Mm.
know you need it at $75,000. You need to know and believe in your heart that that's the price you really, with high confidence, want to talk about and want to shoot for and justify really well why you need it at that number. And just try to talk to them and bring them to terms that make sense on that number. And then follow up, right? Follow up and be persistent with it. And I'm not only talking to people that are having conversations with sellers, but if you're buying off the market with realtors or whatever the scenario is, be persistent, follow up, and then justify your number, right?
Mm.
And great salespeople will do it in a way where people won't be pissed off at you, because I think that there's a lot of investors, or really, I don't want to say weak flippers, but flippers that are losing out just because they want to be firm at their number and act like assholes.
Mm.
And they want people to crawl and come to them. I don't think that's the best way to go about things. You
Yeah.
can deliver a message in a really great way, as to where if you don't come to terms, people still like you, right?
Mm.
So you can just justify it, have a great tactful conversation, be persistent and follow up, and then you'll get that deal,
Yeah.
or you
Uh,
will get a deal.
yeah. I think that's a great piece of advice. Persistence kind of seems like the theme throughout the show today.
That's all I got, Mike. I don't have much in this world, but I do have that.
I like it. Well, Dom, if people want to reach out to you after the show, if they have questions or maybe they're interested, I know you guys do like a lot of free trainings online, or you're always streaming your calls. Like, how can they go about connecting you or finding that information?
Yeah, I think they can go to Dominic Felix on Facebook, or they can go to at Real Dom Felix on Instagram. Look me up, comment, post, or DM me.
Cool. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show.
All right, Mike. Thanks for your time, man. Thanks for having me on.